Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Village of Lake Zurich Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of September 20th at 7 p.m. And so the first thing we do is, of course, do the call to order and roll call. So Tim, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Morrison,
Here, present.
Commissioner Gloas,
Present.
Commissioner Marks,
Present.
Chair Stratman,
Present. Yes.
Commissioner Castillo, Commissioner Giannini, and Commissioner Schultz are excused, and we are expecting Commissioner Muir.
Oh, we are? Okay.
Yes, we
All
are.
right. We will proceed. So that, let the record reflect, we do have a quorum with the four of us here, so the meeting can be formalized. Then the next thing will be the consideration of the minutes of our last meeting, which was August 16th, 2023. Are there any questions or alterations to the minutes as submitted to us?
Nope. All good.
Okay, hearing none. I'd entertain a motion to approve the August 16th, 2023 PCC minutes as submitted to us.
So moved. Second.
Call the roll, please, Tim.
Commissioner Gloas,
Aye.
Commissioner Marks,
Aye.
Commissioner Morrison,
How do you say that one?
Abstain.
Abstain, thank you. Abstain,
abstain,
yes.
Chair Stratman.
Aye. So the minutes are approved as submitted to us. Nice job, Tim. And we move to the third item on our agenda this evening will be the public meeting. First item was going to be to consider the public meeting section of the agenda is the introduction of the comprehensive plan project and the presentation of the community condition analysis. The comprehensive plan presentation does not require a public hearing, rather a public meeting of this commission. Further, property owners within 250 feet of the property were not required to be notified of this public meeting. The item does not require public testimony. So the first item this evening is going to be the public meeting to have Tesca Associates, the consultant selected to update the Lake Zurich's comprehensive plan, to introduce the project and present its community conditions analysis. The role of the PCC is to act as the steering committee throughout the process, culminating in recommendation to the village board to adopt the final comprehensive plan document. So, if you would, please state your name, spelling it out if necessary, and your address for the record. And Sarosh, please present.
Yeah, I can introduce them. We have Tesca in the audience today. We have Ms. Erin Sigliano, who is the lead on the project. We also have her team, which she will introduce, and some of the members of her team that are not present today. So, Erin, if you want to come to the front and go ahead, your presentation is loaded up and will be put on the screen once you ask for it. It's controlled in the back room.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for being with us tonight, commissioners and steering committee members. Yes, we can go ahead and get started here. Ooh, it buzzes, okay. Before getting into the agenda, I just want to do some quick introductions. My name is Erin Sigliano. I'm principal of Tesca Associates, and I'm joined here this evening by Francesca Lawrence and Yuchin Ding. This is not our full team, though. A comprehensive plan requires a lot of specialization, and so our team also reflects Epstein, which is focused on the transportation and infrastructure-related matters, and Egret and Ox, who will be looking at land use, character zones, and some of the different characteristics of that manner. Just to set expectations, I know you all got the agenda. There's a healthy bit of data to go through. Before we go through that data, I just want to lay the groundwork of the process, the meaning, and what we're looking to achieve as part of our engagement efforts. In presenting to the board when we were selected for this project, one of the main focuses we know of the village is coming out of a pandemic. A lot of communities are curious about what the lasting effects are, the trends, and we're seeing some interesting data, everything from market to industry to people really craving social infrastructure, things that draw the community together. So why update a comprehensive plans? Communities typically update them every 5, 10, sometimes 15 years, but it's triggered by major changes outside your control, like a pandemic, as well as development changes, values, visions, and it's an opportunity to connect with your residents on that front. Last but definitely not least, this is a funding tool. So at the end of the process, you're able to really showcase the priorities of your community. You're able to very much more up your chances of being selected for funds and grants that you apply for, like OSLAD, and we'll run through some of those. The plan elements of the comp plan are as noted here, from community character, zoning, land use and focus areas, economic development, environmental sustainability, and transportation and infrastructure. Over the course of the project, we're going to be rolling these out steadily, such that people can connect with those topics that are most meaningful to them and your role. So as the Plan Commission, you're also our steering committee. You all have different expertise, perspectives, different community members that you engage with. Your role as part of this process is really to help guide and checkpoint us. To be champions, we really know that people learn best from their peers, word of mouth. So as much as you can get the folks you know in the community involved, aware, we'll do our best to make sure it's fun and engaging and relevant and doesn't have a bunch of acronyms. We're going to be doing study check-ins. We want to make sure there's no surprises, and you can reach out to us at any time if there's question marks about the data. We're going to be giving an abbreviated overview of what is in your agenda for the sake of time and the content. If there's any questions following tonight, feel free to connect with us or through Sarosh. Our planning process officially kicked off in July. This is going to be approximately an 18-month process. Community engagement is going to run through it all with study checkpoints. And you can see here kind of how it's going to be divvied up TAPA style to provide that focus and nuance. Community engagement. So our engagement process is something that we've fine-tuned over time to ensure trust, transparency, comfort, and more fun, more done. It always starts with early outreach and active listening. We prepare a communications plan to make sure we're hitting the different checkpoints along the way. We've prepared that with staff. There's going to be a whole array of tools and events. We know people connect in different ways, whether it's online or at Sunset Pavilion or different pop-ups, and steady reporting. So the project website is a go-to source for information. Before developing the project website, though, we want to make sure that we have a real pulse on what messages resonate with the community, what their questions are, what they love, what we should be focusing on in this plan. And so we started with some in-depth stakeholder interviews and focus groups. We connected with staff. You can see the different types of organizations and partners. And this is just the beginning, but this helps us start to understand the messaging that we want to put out to the community and those key questions. So I'm just going to give a quick sampling of some of the strengths here. Obviously, the school district, people love raising their family here. Industrial, job base. We're going to reinforce these through the data that we cover in subsequent slides. People really enjoy everything about Lake Zurich. We're learning they're really happy living here. It has something for everyone. That was a direct quote. And people want more opportunities, I'd say, for social connection because they love what they have and all of the great events from Rock the Block to the farmer's market. I just saw the Halloween jack-o'-lantern world is getting set up. So no shortage there. We call them weaknesses, but really these are opportunities. These are areas where people kind of have curiosities, public access, transit. Obviously, infrastructure is something that, traffic is on everyone's list of how we can finesse these nuts and bolts items like stormwater management and flooding. In terms of some of the opportunities we heard from the focus groups, everyone was really keen on what's happening with the Main Street District and is excited for what else can happen and enliven that. We're also seeing a lot of focus on bikeability and walkability, and we saw that driving here tonight. There were a lot of people out walking. And then in terms of challenges, again, these are ways to look at opportunities, but how we can focus in on the different types of housing. We know housing costs are increasing. We know that Lake Zurich is a generational community. Can people move back here who want to move back here? So we took all of this input, and that really helped us understand the different messaging we wanted to put out on the website just as a start. We want to draw people in. And so lakezurichtogether.org is the website. You can go on there, you can subscribe. This is going to evolve over the course of the project. You can see here we have some of the different interactive tools showcased. Our interactive map has a lot of colorful confetti on it now, and if you haven't had the opportunity to go to it, please do. It's very intuitive. You can drag and drop comments directly onto it. What I love is Lake Zurich is super tech savvy and is using the photo upload tool more than I've seen in other communities. So people are really showcasing. These are all examples of different comments that are on the website currently. We also have a whole stack of marketing postcards, which we'll distribute at the end. We'd love for you guys to pass those out. Again, get the word out. We're gonna continue to provide those to staff over the course of the project. They have been really helpful. Hopefully you all have seen this in benchmarks and on social media. Shout out to Kyle for really supporting our efforts here. So we don't want this project to be a stranger to anyone, and we really want everyone to feel engaged and invited into the process. We just had a great farmer's market pop-up. It was the last of the season. We were situated next to the old Coots tent and the portable pickle guy, and we got free pickles and lots of free ideas and advice. I understand it was one of the lower attended markets, but we got heavy foot traffic and a really healthy amount of ideas from it. We're going to be posting an update to the website highlighting more detail than what you see here, but some of the themes that emerged from that first pop-up really focused on a connected community. So people were honing in on the map and different opportunities there, crosswalks, lighting, access. I mentioned things to do. One woman commented on salsa dancing. She was like, no, I'm joking. I'm like, I don't think you are. I think you should write that down. It had 5 or 6 upvote stickers by the end of the day. So that's to say there's no idea that's silly. Share, this is an open environment, welcoming environment. We also heard about community design, so that it's not necessarily just a building, but how do sites relate to each other? How do they connect to each other? If you're putting a building in, how is the green space interacting? So very savvy on the community design front and looking to those opportunity sites. And then lastly, love for nature. People love the abundance of parks and getting out, and so we heard a lot about those. So before we get into the community conditions analysis, I do want to hit on the fact that our first workshop's October 25th. The library is kind enough to host us. And so we want to promote that. We want folks coming out. There's going to be a series of different interactive exercises, a whole host of things, and it's going to be self-paced. So people are welcome to come at whatever time they want and go through at their own pace. With that, I'm going to pause before we go into the data. Is there anything regarding the process or questions on the comp plan in general before we move on?
I do agree, the website is very nice.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and it's going to draw a lot of people to it to get their opinions. As you've already seen, it's very well prepared.
Yes, and there'll be more tools rolled out. I think that we'll be looking to do an ideas wall in the future, so stay tuned. I'm happy to hear. All right.
Commissioner, seeing question comes to this point? No.
Your homework is to subscribe if you're not already subscribed, okay? All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Francie, who's going to start to walk us through some of the community conditions analysis.
Thanks, Erin.
Hi all, Francie Lawrence. I'm a senior planner at TESCA. Thanks for having us here tonight. It's good to meet you all and officially get this really started. So I want to start by saying, maybe Erin mentioned this, but we will not be going over every page of the report that's in your packet. I want to assure you we're not going to be here till 11 p.m. So this is really meant to be a high-level overview. We selected out some content that we thought might be most interesting or good food for thought for the discussion that we hope to have once we're finished presenting this. So what is a community conditions analysis? It's a compilation of the data and research that we've done as a baseline about Lake Zurich, and that's going to inform really everything else we do in the rest of the process leading into drafting the plan with goals and strategies and recommendations. Here's that full content that's in the community conditions analysis, as I mentioned. We're not going over all of that tonight. The complete report will be posted to the project website for public review and comment following this meeting and any feedback that we hear from all of you if we need to make any revisions. So everyone can stay tuned for that. But let's get into it. So we'll start, just every plan has to start with a good map. And this, obviously you all know where Lake Zurich's located. Here's your place in the region. We always start with looking at your past plans. So planning is not new to Lake Zurich, as I'm sure you know. We're updating the 2003 comprehensive plan, but much has been done since then. So these are just some of the documents and policies and work that we'll be building off of and that we've looked to already to understand what's been done thus far. Looking at population, so this chart just goes back to 1990, but from that time you can see over the past few decades, Lake Zurich's grown significantly. In the last decade, that's leveled out a bit, which makes sense. At this point, you're nearly a built-out community, so we don't expect that to go tremendously higher. However, it's something to think about as we talk about potential new housing options and other potential development. But that's a glimpse of your population. So age is another interesting thing to look at in demographics. Here, the two things we'll note are just that the 55 to 75 age group is the fastest growing currently, and your median age has increased 5 years between 2000 and 2020. This is only noteworthy. First of all, you're not alone in this. Many communities are seeing this. And it's noteworthy just to think about when connecting the dots when we talk about changing preferences for housing or future demand for programs and services. It's important to think about what population's driving that. So we'll come back to that idea. Income. To note here is just that Lake Zurich is an affluent community. Over 60% of households earn over $100,000 annually. That's your median household income. I'm sorry, that's not your median household income, but the chart here shows median income. But then also you have a healthy mix of diversity of income, which is what you can see on that income distribution chart. That remaining 40% who earn less than $100,000 per year fall into a few different categories. Looking at race and ethnicity, really what this data tells us is that Lake Zurich is becoming more diverse. So interestingly, 2020 census data shows a really strong increase in the Asian group and also other and multiple races. So the Asian population group has grown 158% since the year 2000. And also interesting and maybe surprising to some is that 20% of residents in Lake Zurich speak a language other than English at home. Lots of numbers on this slide, but key takeaways here, and I think we heard this actually, a quote just like this in the stakeholder interviews, is that Lake Zurich is not just a bedroom community. You have a lot of jobs here and people coming from elsewhere to work here. That's probably not a surprise either. You have the industrial park and then all the retail businesses, and so the data reflects that. And then obviously, as in most communities, people live here and go work elsewhere. Commuting, so 14% per the latest data of Lake Zurich residents work from home. Those that do go to work are majority driving to work. Again, not surprising. The reason we wanted to note this is just that we are hearing in early engagement that obviously everyone's aware there's not going to be a train station here next year. We don't have a train station, so driving is going to be the primary mode, but there's an interest and desire to really think about ways to drive less, walkability, bikeability, as Erin mentioned. And then we heard at the farmers market ideas for people wishing there was a shuttle that could take them to the nearby metro stations when they don't want to drive somewhere. Any questions, just to pause really quick there on any of that? Okay. Continue on into some market data. There was a lot of this data in the presentation. Just to quickly go over some of the top level findings. Lake Zurich has a really high density of retailers, especially when compared with your surrounding communities, and we know those are obviously largely around the Route 12 corridor. The Main Street district, we heard, and the data reflects this, that there's likely some more demand for more uses to come there. So that's going to be interesting to explore further. Industrial is performing really well. Vacancies are decreasing and demand is high. The office market remains weak. That's everywhere, obviously, coming out of the pandemic. That's not surprising. And your housing market is also strong with really low inventory, high sale prices, there's likely demand for continuing to increase the variety of housing types. What do we mean by that? That's like smaller footprints of housing, duplexes, townhomes, and multifamily. And again, that goes back to my earlier point with, as you have a changing demographics and an aging population, those kind of housing types might meet the needs of young families or seniors who want to age in place. Again, a lot of numbers here. Just one thing to highlight is a strength of Lake Zurich is you're largely a consumer retail market. This means that you're less affected by economic up and downturns compared with other communities that might have more specialized retail and more focused on discretionary spending. But you've got kind of nuts and bolts businesses that people need to visit. Just an interesting map showing where your retail businesses are located. Obviously, as we know, they're largely around Route 12, but you actually have almost 20 retail properties in the Main Street district also, which it's a small little cute pocket, but there's actually quite a bit happening there. So that was interesting to note. Housing, always a lot to unpack with housing, but we'll just highlight a few items here. Number one is that your 20% of your housing stock is rent or occupied. That might be surprising to some. Over 70% of all housing was built between 1970 and 1999. That may or may not indicate that there's more maintenance needed if the housing stock is a bit older. And more than half your homes are priced between $300,000 and $500,000. Thinking about housing, there's always a lot of push-pull and maybe some tension between strengths, what some might consider strengths and what others might consider weaknesses. So if you're a homeowner here currently and your property values are rising, that's great, you're sitting on and building more equity. However, your property taxes are higher. And then if you're an interested young family wanting to move in here, and again, something that we heard a lot in stakeholder interviews is that people who grew up here really want to move back. But if home values are too high, that might make it prohibitive to come back. So always maybe impossible to find the exact right balance of housing in a community, but just something, important points to think about as we go. As I mentioned, obviously we know where the industrial businesses are located and really low vacancies, and there's high demand for more space, probably limited land for that to actually accommodate a lot more industrial users, but there's demand for it, which is a good thing. All right, I'll pause. Any other questions on that section? Okay, then I'm gonna pass it back to Erin to talk about zoning and land use.
Okay. Thank you, Francie.
You all are no stranger to these topics, I know. But as part of a comprehensive plan, this is an educational piece for the community as well. Zoning and land use is not something that is topics that everyone understands. And so we're looking forward to kind of introducing this to community. You are a community that these colors really showcase things that make sense when you know what they mean. Red being commercial along the major corridors here, average daily traffic. This is where commercial and retail properties want to orient. And then you see that potpourri of, I said confetti earlier, right around Main Street. Well, that's mixed use. That's a combination. That's parks, that's commercial, that's retail, and it's housing. You want feet on the ground in Main Street, right? You want shoppers, you want activity there. And we want to think about how we can transfer that synergy and energy to different areas because that's also economy and vibrancy and a stable economy. Zoning is the regulation. So this is where we go into setbacks, where a house goes. How far is it set back? Are the businesses in the Main Street district right at the property line so people can window shop and they don't have to look too far to see what's in the store windows? Again, these are the things with educating community and making this an experience that they understand. And when we go a little deeper, we get into community character, which is a big focus, in my opinion, of what we're going to want to explore and the interests that we're hearing to date. When you look at the different place types in Lake Zurich, you can distill it down to a few. So you have your neighborhoods, you have your primary corridors, and you have special areas. So these are school districts, the Main Street area, different focus groups, industrial areas. When we look at these on a map, and this is Egret and Ox put this together to get a general understanding of kind of the personality of place. Where do these character districts kind of manifest, and what are their tendencies in terms of scale of development, architecture, roadway characteristics. So we're going to be taking a detailed look at these different place types to understand what opportunities there are and what the community feedback is telling us about the character in town. Focus areas are also a very prime focus of the comprehensive plan. So there's some really unique special areas that we want to look at, from infill development to connectivity, which we've talked about, to areas in town that might present opportunity for annexation. You know, what is the future? Comprehensive plans, this is a big picture visioning document. This is our opportunity to really hone in on these, as well as the corridors. We've reviewed the community assets and facilities. This is something, too, that we'll be exploring more, everything from environment to the different focus areas of the plan I presented earlier. There's a lot of different environmental assets. We were at the Arboretum earlier tonight, and it was really great to explore. I want to go back for a longer stay and bring my son. But this is, again, thinking through the awareness, the connectivity of these different places, and also the environmental concerns. Community spaces, I mentioned social infrastructure earlier. Social infrastructure and the ability for communities to find their third places, whether it's Paulus Park, whether it's their school, whether it is a pop-up event. These third spaces, as they're calling it in the urban planning realm, are really important to ensure vibrancy and ongoing vibrancy in a community. Community design, I touched on this earlier. This is something that we're going to be exploring with our future poll that will roll out a bit, looking at topics here. And we can't not mention the school district. It is one of the top mentioned elements of what brought people here, why they come back here, and it's fabulous. And I'm excited. We're looking to do a school district focus group. It can be middle schoolers, it can be high schoolers this coming fall, winter. Middle schoolers are very good at telling you pedestrian and connectivity issues because they don't drive. They also tell you how they cut through places. So everyone has their own perspective, and we're looking into tapping into that and understanding what the youth have to say. Sustainability is another area, and we know that there's been really recent advancements with the sustainability initiatives in the village, from the recycling program and styrofoam recycling to the EV charging stations. We're seeing a lot of communities update their zoning codes because of the fast-paced nature of EV and solar and how you stay ahead of that, and also help guide developments that come in to meet your vision on what you see as your sustainability goals. And we're going to end with some nuts and bolts utility. So I'm going to turn it back over to Francie.
Sorry for the whiplash, but neither of us wanted to be talking too long at you. So utilities, obviously, you all know, super important function, part of any community. Just a brief overview, Lake Zurich's utilities are managed by multiple agencies. So this includes the electric utility, sanitary, stormwater, roadway utilities, water, which we'll touch on later, and municipal internet infrastructure. This is a quick glimpse of some of the priorities of the village relating to utility infrastructure. So Lake Michigan water considerations, as I mentioned, and we have a separate slide on it, but most of you would know that that's being considered in the village right now and a big opportunity. Something that we kept hearing and learning as we looked through things was this kind of maintenance first approach that the village takes with infrastructure, meaning that the village allocates considerable funds every year for improvements and proactive maintenance, which prevents more expensive, worse issues later on. So the rest of these really relate to that, and that's something that we heard time and time again, which is probably a little known fact for the average resident, but a good thing that saves money in the long term. Stormwater management, something that came up definitely in both interviews and larger engagement. You have all these, this is a watershed map, so you show 3 different watersheds here. And stormwater management really refers to a lot of different things: drainage, infrastructure management, flood control, stormwater pollution prevention, regulatory compliance, emergency response, and preparedness. Just something to note, and again, in terms of, as we've said, a comprehensive plan is a good time for community education. And something to note is that the village doesn't control the lake's water level impacts. And obviously, Lake Zurich is blessed to have a big, beautiful lake, but there are potential flooding and stormwater results related to that. So that's something we'll be looking at. And water supply, that Lake Zurich is considering transitioning from the current deep well water systems over to Lake Michigan water. This is not something that we, as part of our plan, are analyzing or managing at all, but something obviously important on the horizon for the village, and so we're keeping tabs on that. Transportation. Just a brief overview here. Obviously, like many suburban communities, Lake Zurich relies on its roadway network. The existing bike network that you do have is 2 miles. And as we've said, the village lacks fixed route public transportation. When we say that, we mean Metra lines or fixed route pace bus routes. However, because you're in Lake County, people do have access to a wide array of other transportation assets. So one of those is Lake County recently unveiled a dial-a-ride paratransit service for adults 60 and up and individuals with disabilities. So that it's not true to say Lake Zurich has no public transportation, because that does exist as an asset. And obviously a robust road network and regional network of bike lanes and trails across the county. Here's a glimpse of some of the local roadway network. Key point here is just that while the village does manage and oversee most of those roads, that's the purple lines here, the big red thick ones are those that IDOT manages. So the major thoroughfares through town are IDOT controlled. And active transportation, this is actually the last slide we have before we want to hear from all of you, but want to just define that term. It's thrown around a lot in the planning world, but it probably isn't a commonly known term. It refers to any form of human-powered transportation. So that means biking, walking, or using a wheelchair. And as we've mentioned a couple times now, communities everywhere and people everywhere are wanting to see this expanded and wanting to see more walkability, bikeability, and accessibility for people with disabilities. So this map shows some of those facilities, and also shows the smaller red lines are showing where there are not complete sidewalks, and that obviously relates to walkability, that having a complete and connected network of paths and trails for pedestrians and bicyclists contributes to the overall walkability and bikeability of a community. So we'll be looking into this more in depth throughout the process and with Epstein. And that concludes our marathon of data and presenting all of this information to you. Thank you. We really do want to hear from you now, so we'd like to stop talking, turn it over to you for any initial questions or reactions. If nothing immediately comes to mind, please take a look at these questions and see what resonates, and we're here to discuss.
Thanks, Francie. Well, the one thing, and you already pointed out, which is what the village focusing on, is in terms of that preventative maintenance, if you will, in terms of the infrastructure, and credit to the village manager getting the public works people to see that as priority, because, you know, I hear from my neighbors all the time about how quickly things get responded, and the fact that they're doing this proactively. And even the other issue that they've done is throughout the village, they've installed those safe plates at the curbs for the sidewalks, where it's the, not the diamond plate, but what's the name for it?
The detectable tiles.
That's the one.
The
So,
boarding house, yeah.
so you don't slip, and you know you're going in. So, and they've
Right.
done that throughout the village, and so that just is, and for those people, you know, not only for the kids on bikes, which make it nice, but for those in wheelchairs and stuff, it's a great thing to have. So, you know, just proactively, I think we're on the right track with a lot that's being done. And in terms of the demographics of where we're headed, yeah, you know, because I'm in that group that you're referring to, as, you know, wanting to, stay in place. And, my wife and I intend to stay in our home. We're not looking to go to another, even though we called a little bit of a stir on social media because we had a garage sale. And I posted that we were downsizing. And I upset a lot of my neighbors because they thought we were moving and I hadn't told them. So I used the wrong term. We weren't downsizing, we were decluttering.
Right.
So, yeah. So, Jake, we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the things that stood out to me, I'm one of those 14% of work from homers. So the point about tech access and bandwidth and broadband, I thought was kind of a minor point in the presentation that I'd like to see some more information on, just because there's been a lot of news in the last 10 years about municipalities standing up their own broadband infrastructure and getting away from the monopolistic split up we have with the big telecom providers. And I think via some of the demographics you guys revealed, that may be an area of opportunity for Lake Zurich.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jake.
I don't have a ton. This is great info. I appreciate you sharing this with all of us. Great way to kick this off. I have a question for you, and I don't know if you can answer it here or not, but just out of curiosity, you dove into the data, and so you've seen a lot of this already. Anything surprising going out to the community and hearing their concerns initially, because I'm sure you came in with some preconceived notions based on the data you've seen. So anything surprising there so far?
Either of you feel free to chime in. I'm thinking.
I'll add, so we're right at the start of the community engagement
Sure.
piece. I was excited to hear about some of the creative ideas, I'll note. So I mentioned salsa dancing. That came up because the comment was related to synergy of businesses kind of doing a diversity of uses, right? You're not just a restaurant. You host events in the evening or you do live music. We're seeing another resident mentioned example, I think it was in Denver, of kind of the pop-up container venues that are stacked up, and they can be outdoor markets in the winter and indoor markets. They can be rented for concerts or weddings. So there was a lot of innovative ideas just at the start. Another mentioned water taxis, but water taxis on select nights, because they noted how they like to go to Bobbers and they love Sunset Pavilion. And can there be little fun, creative ways to connect destinations, right? So I was really impressed by not just the dot, but connecting the dots of the opportunities. So I don't know if you guys have thoughts on those, but those were really exciting to
No,
me.
that's terrific. Yeah, it'll be exciting to see what other creative ideas come out of this. So, no, I appreciate you sharing that. And then the other one I had is, as you talked about kind of plan moving forward when we're going to get updates. I know there's a list of kind of sections you want to tackle for the comp plan. Are you going to plan on attacking those in order, or it just kind of depends on what type of feedback you get, or what is the plan to give in regards to when we'll get updates on different types of topics?
Yes, great question. We can share the communications plan with you, which outlines the different major check-ins along the way. At the start, right now, we're kind of in the big picture visioning. We don't want to guide things too much. We want to hear from the community. I don't think we'd hear about water taxis and some of these other things if you focus it too much. So it's big picture visioning at the start. From that, we're going to start to hone in on specific topics. We typically like to group topics so that people understand how they relate to each other. Things aren't in silos. We'll be providing updates to you as well as the community throughout, in terms of after every event. We post updates, and those will go out via email. I think we have about 3 or 4 check-ins with you all as the steering committee. This is very data laden now because we want to have the opportunity to do that. After our first workshop and the poll closes, which this upcoming poll will go through probably the winter time, we'll report back on that because that's a big part of our engagement. So there'll be steady check-ins throughout, and mix of topics. Once we get into the spring, early summer, we're going to start to hone in on goals and priorities and recommendations. That's when we start to pull it all together. And we'll probably do something like a workshop format more with you all at that point. We want it to be interactive.
Okay.
Thanks. That's all I got, other than, in the character districts, I live in an odd area of Lake Zurich, and you gave it a name, so I appreciate it. So now I could use it. So now I'm in the East Main Street residential area, so I'll be repeating that pretty often, so thank you.
Yeah, that's going to be a work in progress too. We're curious about the character districts. You know, they aren't lines; they're Venn diagrams. They overlap. So, glad you like the character district. That's good to hear.
Scott?
Was there any consideration for, and I don't want to sound negative or anything, but like crime rates or anything like that? Is that part of your study as well?
Yes, we have that in the main.
No,
Slide.
we didn't look at crime. It's not always. Go for it. I don't believe that we did look at that. Yuchan, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But we don't always look at crime just because public safety almost falls into more of a strategic planning, village operations category, whereas a comp plan, the foundation really is land use. But obviously, there's overlap there. So if that's something you'd be interested to see as part of our data, we can look into it.
I was just curious more, and I don't mean to use the word crime, but
Sure.
like speeding tickets, that kind of thing. And obviously, you're going to get them along the main corridors. I was just curious if there was any study on like past trends or something like that. So I don't.
We can see what data is available and
Because to me, sometimes land use could also tend to change, you know, or you know, change the lens on what areas would be hit. I don't mean to use the word hit. You know what I'm trying to say.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think I do. Right.
We did interview the focus group police chief. They hosted us actually in their brand new boardroom, which was great. And we did interview them. There wasn't anything notable on that regard, but in terms of additional data, we didn't include it here, but obviously conflicts with traffic, you know, pedestrian, those. So we did look at that. Epstein did do a study on that.
In terms of the comprehensive plan itself, in terms of getting the engagement of the community and, you know, being at Lake Zurich together, the one thing I think that might be a benefit is, you know, not only for us as the steering committee, but for people in general, because there seems to be, we encounter it a lot at our meetings, where there seems to be some confusion about not only what our role is, but how the village goes about issues of zoning. So in terms of if we're doing a comprehensive plan and looking at that, if we're going to be engaging with the community, I would like to see the topic just as an informational component so that people understand, you know, even if not doing a tutorial, at least make it a opportunity for them to learn, be able to decide where to find it themselves. Because the village has a great website of its own, and the information is all there. It's surprising to me to hear from people how many times they don't know where to find it, because it's there. So in terms of the various engagements that you're going to have with people, to even highlight what information is already available to the community as we have it now, as well as looking at the look ahead, but just, you know, an educational component.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, and Scott, to your question, there's a very overlooked part of our village board packets. Every month, the departments each put together a summary report of their operations. They often include statistics that might be relevant or interesting for people to keep track of. They typically end up being attached to the agenda and the board packet of the second board meeting every month. So the board packet agenda for this past Monday night had monthly reports from all the departments, including the police department. And I think some of the things that you might be curious about would be found in there. So again, it's usually provided. Very few people know about it or pay much attention to it, but there is some good stuff in there if it is something you're curious about.
Thank you.
So that is exactly what, thank you, Mr. Geller, because that's exactly what I'm talking about in terms of the information's there. We just need to help the community understand, Lake Zurich together, where they can find that information so that they are more engaged, more, they don't come to a meeting and wind up being surprised or question what's going on because it's already out there and it's available.
Yeah, and quite frankly, because it is, like particularly in the area of crime statistics, the community is very safe. There's very few ups and downs in the counts. I mean, a significant accident or maybe an extraordinary holiday weekend where you might see an uptick in DUI arrests, that kind of thing, might move the needle a little bit in terms of the statistics, but it is pretty steady, so it doesn't catch a lot of headlines and it doesn't catch a lot of attention. It just kind of runs in the background, but it is there. And of course, if anyone ever has any questions, we'd be happy to tell you all about it and share that information and help you find what you're looking for. But it is, quite frankly, as you said, there is a lot of information that we make available, but we're not always sure what people are interested in hearing about. So we'd be happy to help if anyone's looking for it.
Thank you, Mr. Keller.
Thank you.
Okay. Aaron, back to you.
I was just going to say, if you share your top 5 questions that you get repeatedly, we can hone in on how to channel that in a creative way with information. Yeah.
The one item that, and as a follow-up to the pop-up at the farmer's market, people did comment to me. One of the topics that I heard repeatedly is an area, an opportunity for teens, social engagement for teens. And that was brought up repeatedly. The people bringing it up were too young to recognize what I was saying. It's like, you mean like Arnold's on Happy Days? And they were, like, they had no idea what that was. But, just some place for them to hang out, they'd be safe, and so they all said that's what, they would like to see so just to put that out there in terms of a concept.
Yeah, definitely. The activities for youth, similarly, we heard that also in focus groups too. I think it hones in on some of the nostalgic things that also left Lake Zurich, the apple picking, and we heard some of that at the farmers market, but also the opportunities for, it's not just youth who like mini golf. Everyone likes mini golf, right? And yes, we'll be hitting more on some of those ideas in the news blast that we send out end of this week.
Okay, good. Thanks, Aaron. Soroush, do you have anything?
No, again, want to thank the consultants for being here this evening and making this presentation, kicking off the process with the commission as the steering committee. And as they mentioned, as we move along with the project, we'll keep you up to date, both through email, but also through the check-ins from time to time, because that's part of the tasks that they have proposed, and we liked as part of this overall process of getting the plan together. But again, if you all have any questions, you can direct them to me or through me to the consultant. We could do it that way, or directly to the consultant, or directly even on the webpage, lakezurichtogether.org.
Okay. And we all have October 25th on our calendars now? Okay, good.
If you don't, we have a final slide, which is just to that point. If you don't, this QR code will take you to lakezurichtogether.org, and you can do that homework Aaron mentioned by subscribing to the website. And if we don't have a save the date up on the site yet, we will soon, and that's where we'll have forthcoming details about time and location and what folks can expect. But it should be a great event. Thank you all again for your time. We look forward to continuing this process with you and any other questions you have.
Thanks, Francie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
And I also state that a number of the documents that are generated as the process goes on will also be made available on the website once they are ready for public consumption.
Okay,
So
very good.
you take the west half of the neighborhood and I'll take the
Okay.
east.
All right, good. Thank you very much. Okay, so, we need a motion to receive in public record the staff review of compliance with the comprehensive plan project. and the
Mr. Chairman, we don't need that
We don't
at
need
this
that
point,
because it's
no.
just a meeting?
Yeah,
Okay.
this is just a meeting.
So,
We can
thank
move on to
you.
the next item.
All right, we'll move on to the next item, which is to open the public hearings for the following applications. Application PZC 2023-12 for 120 Tulsa Road, special use permit, and application PZC 2023-18 for miscellaneous amendments to the zoning and land development codes.
So moved.
Thank you. Call the roll, please, Tim.
Commissioner Glass,
Aye.
Commissioner Marks,
Aye.
Commissioner Morrison,
Aye.
Chair Strapman.
Aye. So those wishing to speak or comment at the public hearings will now be sworn in. Please raise your right hand while I read a statement to swear you in. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Who's presenting?
That would be me.
That would be you.
Yeah.
Okay, good. We can skip this part. All comments will be addressed to the PCC chair. We can skip that part.
Yep.
So, moving along, we'll go to application PCC 2023-12 for 120 Tulsa Road, special use permit. It was an application for a special use permit and final plat of subdivision to establish a self-storage facility with outdoor vehicle storage on the rear two-thirds portion of a vacant property located within the I Industrial District. The facility would be operated by Extra Space Storage. But the applicant has requested the application be withdrawn and the public hearing to be closed. So then I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing on application PZC 2023-12.
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll, please, Tim.
Commissioner Glass,
Aye.
Commissioner Marks,
Aye.
Commissioner Morrison,
Aye.
Chair Strapman.
Aye. So that is now closed, and we move to the next item, which is the application PCC 2023-18, which is miscellaneous amendments to the zoning and land development codes. It's an application for various miscellaneous housekeeping amendments to the zoning and land development code to enhance their effectiveness. Staff, can you please present the item for us?
Sure, thank you very much. Every year or every couple of years, we bring together a few codes that we feel need to be updated because of changing times, changing technology, changing aspirations, or just to make our municipal code a little more consistent as we discover a few inconsistencies here and there. Because as you know, the municipal code gets updated from time to time and covers a vast area of topics, and sometimes when one section is updated, another one that relates to it may not be concurrently updated. So from time to time, when we discover these things, we bring them before you because amendments to the text of our zoning and land development code do require consideration at a public hearing with final approval through an ordinance by our village board. I'll summarize real quickly, which is also on page 2, the list of amendments that we are looking at. The first one is to clarify certain definitions, both within our zoning as well as land development codes, particularly relating to access ways, including vehicle, pedestrian, and sidewalks, and clarify how they are called out in our definitions sections, both in the zoning code and the land development code. The second one is to provide a means for measurement of exterior lighting within the zoning code under the section for illumination, just clarifying exactly how those measurements will be taken because it wasn't there in our codes before. And we've learned this through experience. Thanks to Mr. Verbeck over here. The third one is to remove the requirement for a legal description of a property within the public hearing and meeting notices. State statute doesn't require a meets and bounds legal description, and we find that sometimes legal descriptions do take up a very large portion of the public notice, thereby incurring costs to the applicant. We figured that we could simply stick to state requirements and have the property address, a PIN number, and a brief description of the action being requested, and that would make for a consistently sized legal notice. Again, for everyone's information, this is the legal notice that is published in the newspapers no less than 15 days prior to a public hearing or a public meeting. Number 4 was to clarify the bulk space and yard requirements for accessory structures and in yards, particularly with respect to sheds or other structures, on how they get considered with respect to their setbacks. And there is a section that requires that if a structure is within the front third or the rear third, its setbacks get considered differently. And so we are clarifying that the entire structure needs to be either in a certain area of the property, the first third or the rear third, to be considered for this. We then looked at removing references of the Zoning Board of Appeals in Chapter 16. A couple of years ago, we brought to you Chapter 12, where we removed all references of the Zoning Board of Appeals, but for some reason omitted Chapter 16. So we are, as a matter of housekeeping, doing Chapter 16 at this point in time. So all references for the Zoning Board of Appeals will be changed to the Planning and Zoning Commission, because the Planning and Zoning Commission acts as the appeals body for any appeals that come before the village. And finally, we're clarifying the requirements for refuse storage regulations and requirements for refuse containers for consistency across the municipal code. Refuse containers and refuse storage is mentioned in more than one section, and they are inconsistently described, and so this effort will just consistently make them the same throughout their references in the municipal code. And those are the amendments we have at this time proposed. We also have the consultant who will do a full analysis of our zoning code once the comprehensive plan completes, and at that time, we may bring some more significant codes that may, changes, I should say, that may arise as a result of some of the recommendations that the plan makes. And so the code changes will follow and be consistent with some of the recommendations being made at that time. But that'll be towards the, maybe around the same time or later next year.
Okay.
So at this point, staff is recommending or requesting a recommendation for the approval of these text amendments to the village board.
Okay, thank you, Sarosh. So fortunately for you, Antonio is not with us this evening, so it's going to be, you won't be questioned as much about it. Does anyone have questions for Sarosh about the presentation? No, hearing none. Okay. Then are we ready to close the hearing on this item? Yeah. All right. Then I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing and move into deliberation on application PZC 2023-18.
So moved.
Thank you, Jen.
Second.
Thank you, Scott. Call roll, please, Tim.
Commissioner Marks?
Aye.
Commissioner Morrison?
Aye.
Commissioner Glass?
Aye.
Chair Stratman?
Aye. Okay, then I would entertain a motion to receive into the public record the staff review of compliance of this application with the zoning standards as presented by staff, and receive the testimony presented by the applicant and by the PCC members and the village staff at tonight's public hearing, and make these standards and testimony a part of the official record for the application and the findings of the PCC, and to recommend that the village board approve the application for various miscellaneous housekeeping amendments to the zoning and land development code to enhance their effectiveness.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Call roll, please, Tim.
Commissioner Marks?
Aye.
Commissioner Morrison?
Aye.
Commissioner Glass?
Aye.
Chair Stratman?
Aye. So unanimous approval for the recommendation to go to the village board at an upcoming meeting.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So, do we have a staff report this evening?
At this time, looking forward to October. We don't have anything lined up as yet, Tim, anything? So all I would say is keep October 25th on your calendars for the open house.
Okay.
And if anything comes up by the time the deadline for applications comes up, we'll certainly let you know.
All right, thank you, Sarosh.
Thank you.
I see no one in the public tonight that we haven't heard from. So we will pass up on the public comment, and then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Call roll, please, Tim.
Commissioner Marks?
Aye.
Commissioner Morrison?
Aye.
Commissioner Glass?
Aye.
Chair Stratman?
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much and good night.